I hope the technology will be friendly enough. It's morning over here, and let me start saying that I'm really delighted to be at least virtually with you, and thank you for this wonderful invitation. I've been given the very difficult task of starting the conversation about what evidence looks like, what evidence is after the digital revolution today, when our lives are so connected, when no bells are given to areas and topics that have something to do with AI, etc. I have about 15 minutes. I'm looking at the clock, and I will respect the time allocated. The last point before we start doing some work, as my dentist would say, don't worry, it will not be too painful. But I'm afraid we need to do some work, and I try to make sure that the slides that I'm going to share with you, in order to understand exactly what we mean by evidence in the 21st century, are as clear and as friendly as possible. Final remark, if there's anything unclear, blame the messenger, do not blame philosophy. I just didn't do a proper job. But enough of that. So some remarks on evidence after the digital revolution. The point, especially discussing with Enrico Letta, who is to be blamed for this invitation, was to try to understand a little bit better, given that we are talking so much, and rightly so, about evidence-based policies and evidence-based decision-making and so forth. What has happened to evidence once we start talking about our life being so connected? Now, I will have to take a few steps back and please relax. This is the painful moment. In order to understand evidence, we need to have a little bit of a better understanding of how the concept of information has changed. And we have to do this rather quickly. So imagine that we look at the queen of all concepts of information, the one that is about the world, information as an answered question. So you have a particular question, what is the capital of France? You have an answer, Paris. That is the information that you have. Paris is the capital of France. As I said, as little painful as possible. It gets complicated, of course. If Alice, therefore, has the right question and the right answer, then she has the information and vice versa. She has the information only if she has the Q and the A. Fine. So far, so trivial. What happens, therefore, is that Alice is informed if this is what she has. Alice is uncertain if she has only questions. For another time and in a completely different moment and universe, we should look at this very carefully. Today, those who control what questions can be asked, how, where, and in what form, from AI to social media to search engines, control the uncertainty of Alice and therefore interactions with the world, but not for today. The extra thing, of course, happens when you remove the Q altogether. Then Alice is ignorant. As I remind people, education is not the acquisition of information, but is the move from being ignorant to being uncertain. The acquisition of questions, in other words. Now, with that out of the way and having a little bit of a scheme, imagine you make the whole world, the whole information available in the world, that particular squarey space over there. That is all the available information as we speak today. There is one part of that that Alice, or humanity, has. Alice has access to the questions and the answers. Fantastic. Then there's something that Alice doesn't quite know. She has access to the questions, but not to the answers. She wonders about this. That's what we are with humanity. We are at the sort of verge or frontier of what is known, and you start asking new questions. Of course, there's a whole world that is what is available to Alice, either as a matter of fact or in principle. She has the questions and the answers, or she has just the questions. But then there's a whole world that Alice doesn't even consider, can't possibly imagine. and to which she has no access, either in terms of questions or answers, and hence Alice's ignorance. Okay, all this is the map behind. What about evidence? Well, evidence works on that particular map. If you understand, as we should, evidence as a kind of information, the kind of information that supports or doesn't or refutes other information, a claim, a hypothesis, a statement, a policy, a particular decision in a company, then evidence over there is what provides the foundation for reasoning, for decision making in all fields of life. Science, law, philosophy itself, hopefully, at least the kind of philosophy I'm acquainted with. And of course, there are different kinds of evidence. We need to remember this. It's not just the kind of informational statement that supports other statements. Sometimes it's empirical, a particular experiment, testimonial, someone says so, documentary, we found that particular piece of evidence in the archive. It could be physical, the glass left by the assassin, and so on. And of course, I have different criteria of evidence. Its relevance, is it reliable? Can we actually trust it? Is it valid evidence in this context? So can we not consider it? Is it sufficient to make the case? These are all things that you know too well. So it's just a bit of a summary of what lies behind. Now, how do we put these two pictures together? Now, the little quick introduction to philosophy of information in a nutshell, plus a bit of evidence and what it is and how it works. Well, here we can stop and start thinking a little bit more carefully. As I said before, evidence is there to support or refute the information that we have. It's also something that does that, so supports or refutes whatever information you have in mind by working on the answer. It's, if you like, imagine evidence being the sort of extra bit of information that is needed to understand whether the answer to that question is the best answer you can possibly provide. Silly example, what is the capital of France? Well, the best answer for that, according to the evidence provided, is indeed Paris. And of course, that evidence could be a voyage, a book on geography, and so on. So the general point, E supports I, is actually, if you scratch a little bit, a question of whether the evidence we are talking about builds the sort of good relationship between the questions we have and the answers we are providing. So evidence could also be understood as an answer to the meta question, whether A is indeed the best answer to Q. Once this is out of the way, we need to introduce the extra ingredient. So all I've said so far has been the case for some time. Call it, say, the scientific revolution, but it's been centuries since we've been thinking along the line of evidence as something that supports or not other bits of information and how. Now, the analysis I provided is more like Shannon style, not information theory, 21st century, but the point remains the same. What is the novelty here? Well, the digital revolution. The digital revolution, by changing how we sort of process, not just encode or record information, and not just how we disseminate information, but how we manipulate information at the same time. 1, 2, 3, think in terms of alphabet, recording, book, revolution, dissemination, computer, and everything else as manipulation. 1, 2, 3. The digital revolution reinforces the other two, but above all is about the manipulation. And today we see this with AI. Well, once we have that kind of digital revolution, what happens to the little scheme that I provided to you with those simple colors, the Q, the A, the I, and the E? Well, that stays the same, but the digital revolution affects all components there, the Q, the A, and the E. It changes the number of questions and the scope of the questions, the quality of questions that we can ask. So it's not just about what you can provide in support of the information you have, but also what kind of information you can actually start getting. Once you start moving and shaking up the red button there, the Q button, obviously you also realize that is also changing the number of and quality and kinds of answers we can get. By changing the Q and the A, well, inevitably the evidence is completely transformed, and quite radically so. So there's a change in scope, there's a change in quality, in acceptability of, and I come back to this point, of what counts and does not count as evidence, and of course in authenticity. This is why I stress the third of the fundamental steps in the information cycle. Not just the recording, not just the dissemination, but the manipulation. Once you start having tools that can manipulate quite independently and certainly very cheaply, very easily. Now, you don't have to have high skills to do it. Whatever content we're talking about, and therefore including the content that we consider evidence in favor of, for example, a policy or a decision to take tomorrow, well, certainly what you are looking at is the authenticity issue being at the forefront. We're almost there. So the dentist has almost done its work. So what is, and this is the slides on which I want to spend maybe a couple of minutes of the 4 left. So what does that mean in general in terms of how evidence is reconceptualized? I choose these 7 points because I think they are the most salient, most significant for our understanding of what evidence looks like in the 21st century. They're not the only ones, and I'm sure during the debate we'll be able to make other points emerge. It's likely that if you had asked a different philosopher, might have come with a slightly, but I would stress slightly different list. I hope that by looking at them, you already grasp what I'm going to say. The management, top left. The volume and complexity of the evidence we have today has generated issues of handling that are unprecedented. It's a good thing. It's the embarrassment of richness, to quote a famous book. We have too much sometimes, and we need to choose. We need to be able to decide what evidence is the most relevant for what. Remember the little scheme before, what questions to ask, what answers to provide, that's information, but whether the question and the answer are properly connected, well, that is what evidence does to us. Managing the right amount of evidence so that the Q and A are properly linked in the best of all possible ways, well, that is today a major issue, much, much more complex than it was in the past. We also have other kinds of evidence, evidence that the past didn't quite have, not as much, not in the way in which today we take it for granted. I call that meta-evidence, with a reference to metadata. It's quite obvious. The evidence of my presence in a particular place, for example, is not given necessarily by anything else than the geotagging of my mobile phone, the metadata that my phone is generating while I'm using it. More on this in a moment, but clearly there's a huge amount of evidence today that is evidence of a meta kind. Funny enough, we also have a retrieval problem together with the management, the metadata. It's the digital double nature. Digital technologies have this recording ability, accumulating endlessly material, information, evidence, therefore, but they're also incredibly fragile, ephemeral in a way that we've never seen before. You can still read the evidence of a trial centuries ago, even in a sort of old manuscript, because the analog is a little bit more resilient. We don't have much evidence of the past presidential election because a lot of the material that was digital has disappeared. It takes one click, turn off that website, rewrite that web page, throw away that telephone with this memory. Quite quickly, so in the next minute or so, encryption and anonymity, there's an issue about how accessible the evidence we have is or is not. And that goes hand in hand with the chain of custody, so to speak, the life cycle, the retention of the evidence, what to keep, what to throw away, and who is in charge, with what kind of even rules about evidence. Think about companies that have to keep evidence of their transactions for X number of years. Of course, there are normative issues. More on this, I'm sure, in the following moments of discussion. Admissibility of evidence. The judicial system has enormous headaches these days, understanding what kind of digital evidence is or is not admissible. Ownership of that evidence, the jurisdiction, international, because of course evidence accumulated digitally in one corner can or cannot be used elsewhere. And of course, as I said, manipulation, the authenticity of what is in front of our eyes. That too is incredibly, remarkably new, not because we'd never seen it before, but because, of course, it was a marginal problem. Today is at the top of our diary and agenda. And in the last handful of seconds, I just want to make things a little bit more painful for a moment, as if all this were not enough. The digital revolution is changing not only our conception of evidence, but also our conception of causality and correlation. Not for today, but I want to share this with you so that we keep that in mind. The two pillars of any reliable form of knowledge are being transformed. Evidence, what supports what kind of information, and how things are connected, causally speaking. What causes what. Now, once you have those two pillars kind of shaken, no wonder we need meetings like this. So thank you so much, and I leave the floor to the panel.